The Queen has fled to England. It is the news of Tuesday, May 14, 1940. People are disappointed, they are angry, sad. 4 days before the Germans have invaded the Netherlands. By sea and air. At the Gripenberg, the Dutch army tried to resist the invaders. However, the German army has more provisions, such as more manpower, they are better equipped, and have more experience. They do not stand a chance against the modern German army. The Germans have initial territorial gains, however, they are afraid that the British might come to aid the Dutch. To speed up the invasion, they decide to bombard the major Dutch cities in order to speed up the unconditional surrender. One by one, until the Dutch capitulate. The strategic location of the Netherlands between the United Kingdom and Germany made it ideal for the basing of German air and naval forces to be used in attacks on the British Isles. The Netherlands had firmly opted for neutrality throughout the First World War and had planned to do the same during the Second World War. It had refused armaments from France and made the case that it wanted no association with either side. Armament production was slightly increased after the German invasion of Denmark in April 1940. But the Netherlands had only 35 modern wheeled armored fighting vehicles, 5 tracked armored fighting vehicles, 135 aircraft, and 280,000 soldiers, and Germany committed 159 tanks, 1,200 modern aircraft, and around 150,000 soldiers to the Dutch theater alone. With a significant military advantage, the German leadership intended to expedite the conquest of the country by first taking control of key military and strategic targets, such as airfields, bridges, and roads, and then using them to gain control of the remainder of the country. The first German plans to invade the Netherlands were articulated on October 9, 1939, when Hitler ordered, preparations should be made for offensive action on the northern flank of the Western Front crossing the area of Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The attack was to be carried out as quickly and as forcefully as possible. Hitler ordered German intelligence officers to capture Dutch army uniforms and to use them to gain detailed information on Dutch defensive preparations. The Wehrmacht launched its invasion of the Netherlands in the early hours of May 10, 1940. The attack started with the Luftwaffe crossing through Dutch airspace and giving the impression that Britain was the ultimate target. Instead, the aircraft turned around over the North Sea and returned to attack from the west and drop paratroopers at Valkenburg and Ockenburg airfields, near the seat of government and Royal Palace in The Hague, starting the battle for The Hague. Germany had planned to take control swiftly by using that strategy, but the assault on The Hague failed. However, bridges were taken at Moerdijk, Dordrecht, and Rotterdam, which allowed armoured forces to enter the core region of Fortress Holland on 13th of May. The situation in Rotterdam on the morning of May 13, 1940 was a stalemate as it had been over the previous 3 days. Dutch garrison forces under Colonel P.W. Charo held the north bank of the Nieuwe Maas River, which runs through the city and prevented the Germans from crossing. German forces included airlanding and airborne forces of General Kurt Studen and newly arrived ground forces under General Schmidt, based on the 9th Panzer Division and the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, a motorized SS regiment. A portion of the 16th Air Landing Regiment that had landed outside the city had managed to fight their way into the city and capture key bridges, but they were soon surrounded and in danger of being overrun by Dutch attacks on their pocket. Outnumbered, with their numbers being reduced by casualties and ammunition running out, things were becoming desperate for the surrounded German paratroops. A Dutch counterattack led by a Dutch Marine company had failed to recapture the Willemsburg traffic bridge, the key crossing. Several efforts by the Dutch Army Aviation Brigade to destroy the bridge also failed. General Schmidt had planned a combined assault the next day, 14th of May, using tanks of the 9th Panzer supported by flamethrowers, SS troops and combat engineers. The air-landing troops were to make an amphibious crossing of the river upstream and then a flank attack through the Kralingen district. The attack was to be preceded by artillery bombardment, while General Schmidt had requested the support of the Luftwaffe in the form of a Gruppe, about 25 aircraft, of Junkers Ju-87 dive bombers, specifically for a precision raid. Schmidt's request for air support reached the staff of Luftflotte II in Berlin. Instead of precision bombers, Schmidt got carpet bombing by Heinkel E-111 bombers besides a Gruppe of Stukas focusing on some strategic targets. The carpet bombing had been ordered by Hermann Göring, to force a Dutch national capitulation. As Schmidt was handing over a second signed ultimatum to the Dutch negotiators, the sound of aircraft engines was heard overhead. Schmidt was shocked, however. It had also been arranged that red flares were to be shot into the sky by the Wehrmacht if the negotiations had begun. If the bombers saw the red flares, they would know to turn back. However, there were two groups of bombers flying towards the city. One group, the larger of the two, had 54 Heinkel E-111s flying in from the northeast, while the smaller group, 36 E-111s, was flying in from the south. As the Germans had captured only the southern parts of the city, there were no flares fired in the north. In addition, there was a large smoke cloud obscuring the southern part of the city, which made it harder to see the flares. The smaller group saw the flares and most of their planes turned back, and the larger group never saw the flares and proceeded to destroy the city. General Schmidt exclaimed, "My God, this is a catastrophe!" In total, 1,150 50 kg, 110 pounds, and 158 250 kg, 550 pounds, bombs were dropped on the city, mainly in the residential areas of Kralingen and the medieval city center. Most of them struck buildings, which immediately went up in flames. The fires across the city center spread uncontrollably and, in the subsequent days, were aggravated as the wind grew stronger, they merged to become a firestorm. Reports stated that 900 people had reported been killed, and 642 acres, 2.60 square kilometers, of the city center had been destroyed. 24,978 homes, 24 churches, 2,320 stores, 775 warehouses and 62 schools were destroyed. Schmidt sent a conciliatory message to the Dutch commander General Winkelmann, who surrendered shortly afterwards at Ritschewoord, a village southeast of Rotterdam. The school where the Dutch capitulated was later turned into a small museum. The Dutch military had no effective means of stopping the bombers, the Dutch Air Force had practically ceased to exist, and its anti-aircraft guns had been moved to The Hague, so when a similar ultimatum was given in which the Germans threatened to bomb the city of Utrecht, the Dutch Supreme Command decided to capitulate in the late afternoon, rather than risk the destruction of another city. Through Allied and international news media, Dutch and British sources informed the public that the raid on Rotterdam had been on an open city in which 30,000 civilians were killed. The real number of civilians who were killed was around 900, and characterized the German demolition of the old city as an act of unmitigated barbarism. The number of casualties was relatively small, because thousands of civilians had either fled to safer parts of Rotterdam, or they had fled to other cities, during the previous 4 days of bombing and warfare. The German weekly Die Mühle, the windmill, stated that the Dutch government was to blame for turning Rotterdam into a fortress, despite multiple summons to evacuate. It also claimed that the old city was ignited by Dutch bombs and incendiary devices. The United Kingdom had followed a policy of only bombing military targets and infrastructure, such as ports and railways, because it considered them militarily important. While the British government acknowledged the fact that the bombing of Germany would cause civilian casualties, it renounced the deliberate bombing of civilian property outside combat zones, which, after the fall of Poland, meant German areas which were located east of the Rhine, as a military tactic. That policy was abandoned on May 15, 1940, one day after the Rotterdam Blitz, when the RAF was directed to attack targets which were located in the Ruhr, including oil plants and other civilian industrial targets that aided the German war effort, such as blast furnaces that were self-illuminating at night. The first RAF raid on the interior of Germany took place on the night of 15/May 16, 1940.